The Twin Towers. What if they never fell? What if the Twin Towers, those iconic symbols of American ambition and resilience, had defied the devastating forces of 9/11 and continued to stand tall in the Manhattan skyline? How might the course of history have been different? On September 11, 2001, the world witnessed a tragedy that shook the foundations of global security and reshaped international relations. However, what if this pivotal moment had unfolded differently, leaving the Twin Towers untouched by the horror of that fateful day? A historical overview of the 9/11 tragedy. The devastating attacks on the Twin Towers on the fateful day of September 11, 2001 would take up to 2,750 lives. The attack was carried out by the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda, which was, at the time, led by Osama bin Laden. 19 militants were able to hijack multiple passenger planes, simultaneously attack the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, crashing a third plane somewhere in Pennsylvania due to the brave and heroic acts of the passengers on board who valiantly tried to stop the hijackers. 40 people would end up losing their lives. The 9/11 terrorist attack is regarded as the most brutal and destructive on U.S. soil ever in American history. The crash on the Pentagon claimed 184 lives, and over 400 firefighters and policemen also lost their lives. In addition, all 19 terrorists were also killed during the attacks. Reflections on a counterfactual scenario. What if the Twin Towers never fell? The Twin Towers exuded the sheer triumph of American power, will, and imagination. They were an icon of economic resilience and freedom. Constructed in 1973, both structures stood at massive height, with the North Tower 1,368 feet tall and the South Tower 1,362 feet tall. Each tower boasted 110 stories and saw the daily hustle and bustle of more than 50,000 employees and over 200,000 clients and visitors each day. The World Trade Center was known as the central hub of economics and finance throughout the globe. In addition, there were over 430 companies in the WTC, spanning 25-plus nations. It was a massive trading and finance community. The September 11 attacks had a significant influence on U.S. counterterrorism strategies and national defense policies. It's not far-fetched to say that the world changed for the worse. Had not there been an attack on the Twin Towers, or if the terrorists were intercepted, there would be no war on terror in Afghanistan. Iraq would not have been invaded 2 years after 9/11, but most importantly, 3,000 people may still be alive today. In addition, the U.S. Patriot Act would never have been initiated, which today gives absolute authority to the U.S. government to carry out extensive domestic surveillance programs. The significance of exploring alternate histories and understanding the impact of pivotal events on the course of history. By understanding the sophisticated connection between causality and determinism in augmenting historical events, studying alternate events on histories can be a great way of contemplating forces that can or may impact our future. By understanding that there are ways not to repeat history, what-if scenarios can act as reminders that all human beings have the choice to be more accountable and responsible and should be duty-bound to act decisively and morally in their quest to make an impact on changing history. Studying alternate histories can motivate people to think more critically and ponder deeply into deciphering historical events. It gives us the opportunity to factor in multiple variants, decisions, and factors that went into a particular event, how it happened, what caused it, etc. The Twin Towers, symbolism and importance. The World Trade Center easily cemented its place as the most incredible feat of architecture and construction, not just in New York, but throughout the globe. It was a symbol of American brilliance, progress, and innovation. This is also among some of the main reasons why the towers were frequently shown in various TV shows, movies, and advertisements. The mere silhouette of the Twin Towers was easily identifiable by anyone in the world. In terms of its construction, the WTC was nothing short of an engineering ingenuity. Constructed in 1973, the towers featured futuristic technologies and innovation, especially when you talk about skyscraper development methodologies. In addition, the towers were integrated with tube structures, never before seen in construction at the time, significantly enhancing their structural integrity. However, one of the most impressive feats of architectural prowess featured in the WTC was its unparalleled elevator system. It was specifically designed to help safely and quickly accommodate groups of people at a time, taking them up and down throughout the 110 stories. Moreover, the WTC wasn't just an economic hub of the world, it also had considerable cultural value. There were countless public and corporate events organized within the towers. There were art exhibitions, etc. Plus, the towers were also home to a famous restaurant known as the Windows on the World. The economic importance of the World Trade Center complex and its role in global trade and finance. It's safe to say that the central purpose of developing the Twin Towers was used to prominently cement and exude a powerful sense of grandeur, one that would never be forgotten. The towers were also a reminder of resilience to the American people after the end of the Japanese-American War. It was a symbol of free trade and the globalization of trade. The hundreds of offices in the WTC were occupied by a litany of intelligent, experienced, and innovative businessmen, policymakers, lawyers, and economists. It was the center of economics for the U.S., where global trade policies were made, implemented, and centralized. The Twin Towers as symbols of American resilience, innovation, and progress. Holding the title of the tallest building in the world, at the time, the towers were a powerful mark of both economic and cultural progress. Featuring futuristic architecture and exceptional construction, they were a symbol of American innovation and spirit, serving as a reminder of the will of the people to push through boundaries in search of even grander achievements. More than that, the towers were also a visual testament to the epitome and the personification of the American dream, providing tens of thousands of people with various employment opportunities, stepping stones to corporate success, and the promise of prosperity. The aftermath of 9/11 in our reality. Economic instability and recession aside, one of the first and most tragic consequences of the 9/11 attacks was the staggering loss of human lives. Up to 3,000 people died. Families were left in tarnish, hijacked passengers dead, and the lives of hundreds of policemen, firefighters, and first responders squandered. Moreover, property worth billions of dollars was destroyed, including a significant portion of the Pentagon building. In the aftermath of the attack, while people were still in shock and awe, the U.S. stock markets crashed, leading to significant short-term economic decline. The federal government was compelled to ground all flights to and from the U.S., which led to a massive disruption in air travel. The security of all U.S. airports was substantially beefed up. Everybody had to go through lengthy security checks and in-depth screening procedures. There was widespread hate and resentment towards the Muslim population of the U.S., and Muslims were discriminated against. Trying times for all. In terms of more significant consequences, in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. launched a full-scale war on terror in Afghanistan with the aim of annihilating Al-Qaeda and decimating its ranks, which is also when the government initiated the Patriot Act, which gave several security agencies the power, change immigration policies, and heightens public surveillance. The world changed after 9/11. The attacks affected millions of people in the U.S., with some suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Some couldn't get over what happened. It was chaos. The subsequent changes in U.S. foreign and domestic policies. In October 2001, shortly after the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. government decided to launch Operation Enduring Freedom, which was the invasion of Afghanistan to eliminate key members of the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda and put an end to their iron grip in Afghanistan. This is what essentially marked the initiation of the U.S. war on terror. In 2002, the U.S. restructured its local and international security policy apparatus, creating the Department of Homeland Security. The DHS was founded to further streamline a coordinated effort to fight domestic terrorism and combat global threats. In 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq, launching Operation Iraqi Freedom. This was to overturn the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, who was the president of Iraq, and to dismantle his claims of using weapons of mass destruction. It was a controversial war and wasn't necessarily a direct response to the September 11th attacks. The goal here is to thwart the enemy's attempts to use weapons of mass destruction, which were never found. The shift in international relations and the global perception of security and terrorism. The attack on the U.S. and the destruction of the Twin Towers considerably heightened counterterrorism to the very top of every country's list of security and economic agendas and priorities. Several developed and developing nations joined heads in a global effort to help the U.S. and its allies combat systematic local and international terrorism, the threat posed by dangerous and radicalized militant organizations such as Al-Qaeda. Countries such as the UK, France, Australia, Pakistan, India, and many others provided logistic and intelligence support and military assistance to fight terrorism on all fronts. Imagining a world where the Twin Towers stood. It's safe to say that we'd be living in a different world had there not been an attack on the Twin Towers. You see, the World Trade Center was the epitome of the American dream. It was a symbol of resilience and financial prosperity, housing hundreds of businesses, both local and global. Had the towers remained, all these businesses may have evolved, further contributing to lower unemployment and optimizing the U.S. economy. The WTC supported thousands of jobs throughout multiple industries. It employed lawyers, janitors, insurance companies, real estate professionals, food vendors, etc. If not for the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. may have continued to lower the rate of poverty, fight homelessness, and combat unemployment. How U.S. policies, both domestically and internationally, might have been different without the catalyzing events of 9/11. If 9/11 never happened, the people would have enjoyed more civil liberties in terms of privacy and public surveillance. The government would not have superseded powers in the form of the U.S. Patriot Act, and the security agencies would instead shift their focus to intelligence gathering, reinforcing law and order, combating systematic racism, etc. Similarly, billions of tax dollars would not have been spent on the creation and implementation of the Department of Homeland Security. The tax money would instead have been invested into building public housing, optimizing healthcare, increasing social security, fighting poverty, and much more. Best of all, if 9/11 had never taken place, the tight and exceptionally vigilant and strict airport security and clearance process we all experience may never have been implemented. There would be no stringent passenger screening, and travel protocol may have been less strict and more accommodating. Alternative paths of history. The Twin Towers were an engineering marvel. They represented a brilliant blend of sheer human ingenuity, futuristic innovations in construction, and exceptional architecture. Keep in mind, they were constructed in the 70s. If the 9/11 attack hadn't happened, the World Trade Center would still serve as the perfect model for present and future skyscraper developments in technology. There may have been an acceleration in the production of even more resilient and durable materials that may be more in line with energy efficiency. Similarly, if the towers stood today, it is also highly probable that they may have furthered urban housing development and apartment complexes throughout New York. The entire region revolving around the Twin Towers may have experienced an exceptional boom in residential and commercial development. They would have made a massive contribution towards the city's cultural development, leading to a complete overhaul of present financial districts. The implications for U.S. foreign policy. If the Twin Towers stood today, the U.S. government would have shifted much of its focus on establishing and strengthening its diplomatic relations with its allies. There would not have been a war on terror. Afghanistan and Iraq, along with several other Middle Eastern and African countries, may have benefited from growing economic and political ties with the U.S. and the rest of the Western world. Moreover, there would not be any stringent immigration policies, which would have encouraged global diversification and fostered improved relationships. The security landscape of the U.S. in the absence of 9/11 would instead emphasize the cultivation of ideas and innovation to combat several other issues such as pandemics, domestic racism, crime, climate change, and much more. There would also be a massive inclination towards reinforcing and enhancing domestic and international law enforcement instead of the implementation of mobilized militarization throughout the globe. Countries would have engaged in sharing intelligence to consistently and effectively thwart and/or prevent terrorism instead of invading other nations in the name of freedom and liberty. Summary: the attack on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon will forever be etched into our minds. It's difficult to ignore the devastating consequences that have shaped the world we live in today. However, it's also nice to think about what could have been had 9/11 never happened. The continued presence of the World Trade Center would have immortalized American tenacity for brilliance, resilience, and liberty for all. However, it did happen, and it serves as a harrowing reminder of just how a moment can completely change the course of cultures and countries.